1,000 mobile phones sold every minute, 7 T-shirts, 3 saris and 4 pairs of footwear sold every second. $5 billion worth of e-commerce sales and nearly 80 million shoppers across all platforms. All of that in just the first week of this festive season. According to a Bain report, 3 out of 5 online shoppers now belong to Tier 2 or smaller cities, and 1 of 3 e-commerce users is Gen Z. India's e-retail funnel is getting bigger and could have 500 million online shoppers in the next 5 years and become the world's second largest base, only behind China. Also propelled by the D2C revolution, India's e-commerce market could triple in size from $50 billion in 2022 to $150 billion by 2027, according to the Bain report. The report also says e-commerce in India is well into its third phase of evolution, one that's being driven by small-towners who are big fans of Reels and the Gen Z who are reportedly spending 8 hours online every day. No wonder that Amazon and Flipkart have embraced live commerce and organized an army of influencers for their great festive season sales this year. E-commerce 3.0 is no longer just click and order, it's more immersive. Flipkart is entering the metaverse with Flipverse. Why not? 1 out of 4 buyers on its platform is using the virtual try-on feature before ordering a makeup product. Social commerce, live commerce, quick commerce, new rules of the retail game are being written by brands hoping to catch new consumers online. Hello and welcome. I'm Shireen Bhan. You're watching Young Turks, India's longest-running show on startups and entrepreneurship. And joining me now to talk about e-commerce 3.0 is Manan, Bhasin, partner at Bain Company, and Kanwaljit Singh, the founder and managing partner of Fireside Ventures, a big investor in many of India's D2C brands. Manan, Kanwal, many thanks for joining us here on the program. Manan, let's start by talking to you. I just rattled off a bunch of numbers that give us the size and scale of the opportunity as well as the headroom and the runway for growth. But what's different about e-commerce 3.0 and the way that it's being adopted and the way that it's playing out?
Super. Thank you, Shireen, for having me. So as you said, the e-tail itself has matured vastly over the last decade or so that we've been tracking this. We've seen 3 phases of growth. Pre-2015 was very much a phase of cautious early adoption. You saw mobiles to be the predominant category. The e-commerce was very much restricted to metro tier 1 cities. Phase 2 of growth was between 2015 and 2020. This is the growth phase. This is an area where tier 2 cities really took on, and you saw a rapid kind of expansion of e-commerce, not just from like horizontal such as Flipkart and Amazon, but also the advent of vertical players. Phase 3 is really a new, or COVID-19, I would say, has ushered us into this era of growth. And this is an era of innovation, in my opinion. And there are 3 hallmarks of this phase, which have become amply apparent over the last 18 months or so. The first one is a micro-segmentation of consumers. You increasingly have consumers not just coming from metro tier 1 cities, but also from tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities. You have a lot of consumers coming from low middle income groups. You've got a lot of consumers coming from Gen Z. Now, these are all different consumers. They want discrete, their behavior is discrete, and it's incumbent upon platforms as well as brands to cater to these different consumers differently. The second big hallmark is the idea of different business models, and a lot of platforms are coming up with ideas such as social commerce, video and live streaming, quick commerce, direct to consumer. All of this is becoming much more important. And then finally, it's an era of technology. It's you touched upon it briefly, but this is all of these platforms are really going to use and utilize technology very strategically to deliver a bespoke customer experience to consumers.
Several important aspects that you raised there, including, of course, micro-segmentation, which we are starting to see play out in a much more evolved fashion in the market today. Of course, different business models as well. What more brands can leverage in terms of technology, what more platforms can do by way of leveraging technology. Incidentally, not a particularly great day for companies like Meta, which have taken a hammering on account of poor numbers. But Kanwal, let's address the issues that Manan was just talking about the evolution, the deepening of the market. The funnel is getting deeper. That is very evident. That's very clear. As someone who's been tracking, observing, and participating in this story for a decade now, what to your mind stands out as the biggest difference this time?
So, I think the depth of the market, like you called it, is really the most interesting factor. It's not occasional shopping. It's not shopping for the one-off kind of items. We are seeing people start now almost adopting digital first for everything that they consume, and it's expanding into even services, into solutions. So I think a way of life has changed, and COVID really was the main, I would say, reason why that happened so quickly, and none of us anticipated that. Second thing that has happened is that because the penetration is going into small town India, it is truly becoming a access game, which earlier was not even available to these consumers. And that is a big change in terms of, because in the urban India, at least, there was a choice to shop from online or offline, and it was more a matter of convenience. But in small town India, rural India, it is actually becoming the only way of life. And as consumers aspire for better, as they aspire for more, it's becoming even more evident that they will probably go digital first. And that really is what excites us. I think the only caveat I would add, Shireen, is that you have to design the business models and the brand narratives for the right audiences. Like Manan said, if you're talking of micro segmentation, what worked for a urban millennial consumer in a big town metro will not work for a small town consumer. So you have to think through the narrative, the brand positioning, you have to think through the size of the SKUs, you have to think through price points. So that is really what brands have to start thinking about. And I think that probably is the next shift and change we will see going forward.
That's very important, and I want to get Manan to comment on that. Manan, as Kanwal was pointing out, that is the transition we are yet to make. This is an opportunity that's opened up. It's an opportunity that has been accelerated on the back of the pandemic. But what works in Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore may not necessarily work in the smaller cities and the smaller towns. When you talk about micro-segmentation, and a lot has been said about the likes of Meesho and so on and so forth, are we starting to see business models reorient themselves or orient themselves to cater to these micro segments, to cater to these new niches, so to speak?
Absolutely. I think this is most certainly happening, right? Like, I think if you look at the last 5-6 years or so, Tier 2 has been a very critical component of India's e-retail story. As you rightly said, 60% of online shoppers hail from Tier 2 or smaller cities. The way I've always thought of it is Tier 2 has always had affluence and aspiration. What it's been missing is access, and e-retail has bridged that gap quite effectively. And a lot of business models, specifically as you think about social commerce or if you think about video, live commerce, etc., are very much catered towards these segments. So if you think of quick commerce as an alternative for which is convenience-based, less than 30-minute delivery of grocery, it's very much catered towards that metro Tier 1 consumer. These are companies which are not even talking about Tier 2 cities at this point of time. In fact, they're very much saying that we're going to restrict ourselves to the top 8 to 10 cities. When you on the flip side, you talk about a social commerce platform such as Shopsy or Meesho, very much their growth has come from Tier 3 and smaller cities, and it's really been, they've taken on the mantle of bringing all these new shoppers on board into the fray of e-commerce.
Yeah, and we're seeing that playing out, at least for companies like Meesho, etc. But Kanwal, I want to come back to you. While we are talking about the digital-first opportunity and the way that brands are attacking this space, but one thing is also evident, and many of the brands that you're invested in have been talking about, while they're acquiring customers online, they also need to service them offline. So this phygital, hybrid model, and in its many shapes and avatars, playing out. What is the interesting aspects of that? Because, whether you talk to a Mamaearth or you talk to Nykaa, while we saw this big move towards digital adoption, it brought down the rate, the acquisition rates as far as customers were concerned, especially through the course of the pandemic. We saw burn coming down, but now everyone's talking about offline expansion. How are you seeing this play itself out?
Very close to my heart, Shireen. Thanks for prompting the question. I would have bunked it in somehow. So, what worked, like Manan said, over the last 10 years was this emergence of the digital infrastructure and therefore the opportunity to build digital-first brands. I think the next decade is going to be all about omni-channel. And that is really what excites us the most because there is a certain cadence and certain rhythm to how online first brands will work. But eventually, India is still going to be 90 plus percent shopping offline. And the way the brands have to visualize or reimagine their entire channel strategy has to be very different than, say, traditional companies like Unilever or Nestle or Dabur or ITC. And what we are starting to see is that infrastructure coming through. So there are new age distribution companies which are using technology to almost demand forecast and cater to a certain type of offline distribution. And we are seeing that trend becoming bigger and bigger across not just urban India, but even going into small town India. We are seeing logistics, warehousing, last mile, dark store,
Yeah.
so many innovations happening in the infrastructure. And ultimately, it will be a combination. So, if you go back to the basics, Shireen, we are talking about brands, we are talking about how consumers engage with brands. The choice of channel should be where consumer wants it, not where the brands want to position themselves. So I think that is the most interesting phase that we are entering into. And if we can crack that narrative and that business model with the omni-channel play, we can see significantly large brands coming out of India in a big way.
So when we talk about the economics of it, how challenging is it going to be able to work, operate sustainably and profitably in this digital or omni-channel environment?
No, so actually, it is very interesting. What we have seen, even in the early, signs of for the last few years, is that the brand is getting built on online digital channels. So consumers are engaging with the brand more actively. They are working on social media. They are engaging with the brand on various different digital media channels. But they are looking for the products across different, distribution points, including offline. So in one sense, the benefit of the work that brands are doing on the online channels are actually percolating into demand generation at the offline. So that's one big, I would say, a challenge which is addressed. Second is that these companies which have come in, we saw Urans and the Jumbo Tails come out, and now new age companies like Rippler, etc., are offering very efficient distribution models using deep technology, which therefore takes away the burden of distribution from individual brands having to set up their own distribution systems. And I think that is the other breakthrough, which is allowing for the cost to be managed. And third is that in an offline context, while yes, you have to deal with inventory and you have to deal with the cost of distribution, there is also a significantly lower cost of customer engagement because in digital, you are actually spending a significant amount of money to acquire and retain customers. So there is almost a balancing act. And not surprisingly, some of our companies, like you mentioned, Mamaearth, etc., are actually seeing higher profitability on the offline channel than even on some of the digital channels.